Hi, this is Liz, and today I'd like to show you how to make this card using a new set from Stampin' Up. And here's another card that I did with the same set, and I'm going to show you what that set looks like. It is called Blended Seasons, and it comes in two separate boxes. And I got the clear set, which is on rubber. And you can see all the different images. I'm going to use these fall leaves for this card. If you want to make the flower card, I have specific instructions on my blog. There's a die set that you can get bundled with this. I'm going to be using this maple leaf, which is the outline of the maple leaf, and I cut that from Stampin' Up's gold cardstock. I also used the solid maple leaf that is from Seasonal Layers Thinlits, this die set, to cut out another piece on top. As you can see, there it is. The glossy one is the solid image. So it takes a while to do this card, so I'm going to use the small Misty. I have two pieces of it's crumb cake, but it looks like craft cardstock, and I'm going to be using VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp this because we're actually going to use Stampin' Up's watercolor pencils. As I said, I have two pieces in here. You don't really have to do them, stack them up like this. I just happened to because it was easier for me. So I'm going to make sure I get two images stamped, and they don't really have to be in the same position. It's just that that's what I did, because I'm going to color them both, and then I'm going to watercolor them using the Stampin' Up! Watercolor pencils. The neat thing about watercolor pencils is you can do this on darker colored cardstocks, and they really turn out nice. They don't give you necessarily a chalky look, they give you a clear color look. So now I'm going to stamp the card front. This is 4 inches by 5 1/4. And I stamped this twice because I wanted it really black. And I also put the thank you verse out, stamped that also on the card while I was right here with the Misty. So here's the watercolor pencils, and these are the colors that I used. I used Old Olive for the leaves, and I also added some Daffodil Delight and some Pumpkin Pie and Real Red, and I did use a little bit of the brown, possibly on the stems, as I remember what I did. So watercolor pencils are really great for beginner watercolors because you can fix mistakes, and they are so easy to use. They're like using your colored pencils, but you can blend the colors with water. And as you see me do this, you'll see how the colors blend together. And also because you can actually take these with you. You can stamp a bunch of images and take them with you and not have to carry all the water because you're just coloring with colored pencils, basically. So now when I put these on, the first color I put on is going to be the Old Olive, and I have the two images, right? And the one on the right there, I'm going to actually cut out a piece of it and mount it right on top of the one on the left, the card front. So I'm actually putting the Old Olive in, and as you can see, I'm not coloring in the whole leaf. I'm just putting a dot here and a dot there, and I'm keeping it more toward the center of the leaves, mostly because I think that when fall comes, the leaves start to turn on the outside of the leaves. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but anyway. And as you can see, I didn't put a lot of green in there. If for some reason you go outside of the line with a little bit of color before you add the water, that's when you want to take an eraser, and I use the like a sand eraser, and I just kind of erase it lightly so that it gets the pencil off of the paper before I add the water. And as you can see, we're going to do Pumpkin Pie next, and I'm going to actually color the entire image with the pencils before I add any water. Now, you might think this is a little strange because you might think, well, how do I know what it's going to look like when I blend those colors? Well, with fall leaves, it'll work out fine. Just add a little bit here. And I'm not really going over the green. I'm going close to it, but there's still going to be some holes left because I'm going to use these 4 different colors. I love maple leaves, especially the sugar maples, because they turn such brilliant, beautiful colors in the fall. So this pumpkin pie really, when I add the yellow on it to the Daffodil Delight, it'll really brighten it up. And then the final color I added was Real Red. So I'm probably going to speed this up a little bit so I can finish this. And I'm sorry for the length of the video. I don't like my videos to go over 10 minutes, but sometimes you just have to do that. So now I'm putting the yellow in, and then the Real Red on the very tips. And you'll notice that I'm dragging the pen down toward the center of the leaf. Notice that the green is in the center. So I have both of my images colored now. So I'm ready to add the water. I'm going to use plain clear water on my brush, and I'm not using a water brush. I'm going to use my number 4 round silver brush. I find this easier to control the amount of water because I don't want very much water on this. I don't want to pill the paper up at all. It's not watercolor paper. So as you'll notice, I blotted this off on a paper towel, and so I got most of the water off the brush after I put it on. So there's a very light sheen of water. I have no drops of water, and as you can see, I'm starting at the tips and I'm brushing down toward, I'm stroking down toward the center of the leaf because I really don't want a muddy look here when that green mixes in. And it really doesn't get muddy, but when you mix the orange with the red and the yellow, it just gives you those nice, beautiful fall leaf colors. And then you still have a little bit of green left in there. So I don't scribble back and forth with the brush, unless once in a while in the very tip, if I want to get the very tip colored in, I might scribble back and forth just lightly like that. But most of the time, I'm just dragging the brush down. Now, if your brush gets contaminated with some of the color and it gets too much pigment on it, just clean it off. I usually drop it on the paper towel first and then I stick it in my clean water. I call that clean water, but with this technique, you don't get a lot of pigment into your water, so it doesn't really get that dirty. Since I'm covering up the center of this, I don't really have to paint those center leaves, but I don't really know where the die cut's going to actually land, so I went ahead and colored it all the way underneath it. Now I painted this, added the water, and I painted both images, both pieces of the paper, the same way. I mean, close to the same way. You can't get them exact when you're coloring like this and painting. But when I do color these things, I stick with one color at a time. I color all the one color, like you saw me color all the green on one piece, and then I went to the other piece and colored all the green, and then I moved to the orange. It just is a time saver because I don't like flipping back and forth between the colors unless I find I made a mistake or missed a part, something like that. So I'm going to eventually speed this up here. I'm not quite sure when that happens, but when it speeds up, you'll see the rest of it all colored. I think the first thing I ever did when I watercolored was with watercolor pencils, and I really liked them because they're easy to control. Like I said, you're just coloring it on like a colored pencil, and then you're just blending with a very light brush of water. If I were on watercolor paper, you have, there's more, it's textured more. But this cardstock is smoother. So you're not going to get the gaps in a regular cardstock like this, a smooth cardstock, that you're going to get with watercolor paper. So, and these watercolor pencils from Stampin' Up! Are really creamy. They're softer than some pencils that I've used. Years ago they sold another set, and they were okay, but they were not as soft as these new ones. So, and when I'm done, I show you my piece of, you can see how much ink is going over on that paper towel. Not very much. So you can see that I didn't put very much water at all on these. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to position the solid maple leaf die where I want to cut it out. And I'm going to cut it out on this panel over here. So I'm basically going to just tape that down and run it through my Big Shot to cut it out. And then I'm going to take a Wink of Stella. This is the gold Wink of Stella. Now, on this particular one, I'm going to paint, because I wanted this to stand out a little bit, I'm going to paint just the background of that crumb cake paper. I'm not going to paint the leaves with the shimmer. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to put 2 layers on it. So as you see me paint this, I'm only going around into the background color of that stamped image. So speeding that up again and getting the second layer on there. And the final thing I'm going to do with this leaf is I decided I really wanted it a little shiny, not just shimmery, but shiny. So what I did was I'm going to take a Versamark pad and I'm going to emboss it with clear embossing powder. Now I didn't show doing it twice, but what I like to do is I'd like to take a little scrap piece of cardstock and the Versamark pad, and I'm going to put this directly to the leaf. As you can see, it's sticky. And then I'm going to add the clear embossing powder, and I actually did this twice. So once I put the clear embossing powder on it and heat embossed it, I actually did it again because the detailed clear embossing powder that I'm using, and now I flipped that piece of cardstock over because there's some ink on there. So I flipped it to the clean side and ran it, heat embossed it, which I'm not showing you because you know what that is. And when it's done, and I've done it twice, I think my video paused a minute here. So now I've heated it. And you can see that it's bumpy a little, so I actually did it a second time. Now these are cut out of the gold cardstock that Stampin' Up! Sells with the outline leaf. Now I want to show you that sometimes those dies that have the outlines, the little holes in them that you're supposed to poke them through, I take my bone folder and I just slide it across those holes that are popped up, because with foil cardstock, and even the other cardstock sometimes, regular, it shows those little holes, and I don't like them shown. So I just flatten them out. I'm going to use the Nuvo glue pen, and I'm using that piece of cardstock, and I have the gold leaf flipped over, adding it. It's hanging off the edge a little, but that's okay because I'm going to mount this on another piece of paper. So I'm going to make sure it's down really well. I'm going to put these flat, glue these flat to the card so that they're sticking out of that group of leaves. And then I've decided that I'm going to use Stampin' Dimensionals. I'm bending my leaf back a little bit. And I'm putting quite a few of these. I could have cut the leaf out again with foam and done all that, but then I decided, well, the little stem that's on there is going to be a little hard to manage. So what I actually did was I put 5 of these on there, bent the leaves back down around, and then actually on the final card I put a little tiny bit of glue on the bottom of that stem and pressed it against the card. I wasn't too worried about that. Now I'm lining this up. As you'll see, it's the same image that I've got stamped, so I'm actually going to line it up with the image that's already there, so it's the same image. And then just press it into place. Again, I put a little glue on that bottom stem, but that's the card. Now the last thing I did was I took some of Ranger's glossy accents, and I'm adding some copper and gold sequins around to the card. And then finally, I'm going to take a piece of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 soft suede cardstock, and I'm using mono adhesive, Tombow mono adhesive, and I'm going to glue that right down. And then I'm eventually going to put this on a card front. I don't show you that because it just takes too much time.